I spent 20 years working in a dusty shipyard. I burned my hands and breathed in smoke just so I could pay for my nephew, Elias, to become a top doctor. I wore old rags so he could wear a fancy white coat. But as I stood in the front row of his big celebration, holding a gold watch I bought for him, he didn't see the man who raised him. He saw an embarrassment. The room was full of rich people clapping for him. When Elias saw me, he didn't smile. He looked at me like I was trash. He leaned into the microphone and said, "I'm sorry, but a poor worker has wandered in here. Security, please take this man to the back door. Some people don't belong in a room this expensive." The rich crowd laughed. As the guards grabbed me, Elias whispered in my ear, "Go back to the dirt, Ben. I'm a big shot chief now. I don't want an uncle who smells like a garage." He thought he was throwing away a nobody. He didn't know he was throwing away the man who owned the entire hospital. Before we see how I take everything back from this ungrateful man, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The rain felt cold on my face as the security guards pushed me out of the shiny glass doors. I landed on the wet pavement, and my old suit soaked up the dirty water from the street. Inside, I could hear the music playing and people cheering for the great Dr. Elias. They thought he was a hero who grew up in a rich family. That was the lie he told everyone. He told the hospital board that his parents were famous doctors who died in a plane crash. He told his beautiful fiancée that he came from old money. He was so afraid that someone would find out his real uncle was just a man who fixed rusty ships for a living. I sat there on the ground for a minute, looking at my hands. They were covered in scars and deep lines that would never come clean. Those lines were there because I worked 18-hour shifts in the heat and the cold. I remember the night Elias got into medical school. I didn't have enough money for his first big deposit. I had to sell my only truck and work 3 jobs for 6 months just to make sure he didn't miss his chance. I lived on bread and water for a year so he could eat steak with his classmates. I didn't mind. I loved him like a son. I thought he loved me too. But standing there in the rain, I realized that the boy I raised was gone. In his place was a man who cared more about a shiny floor and a silk tie than the person who gave him everything. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gold watch. It was a Patek Philippe from 1950. To a normal person, it just looked like an old watch. But to a collector, it was worth over $500,000. I had bought it 10 years ago as an investment, back when I first started making real money. You see, there was one thing Elias didn't know. He thought I was just a poor worker at the shipyard. He didn't know that 5 years ago, the shipyard went bankrupt. Instead of losing my job, I used every bit of my savings to buy the company. I fixed the way they made ships, and within 2 years, I was the owner of the largest shipping company on the East Coast. I became a billionaire, but I never told Elias. I wanted to see if he would still love me if he thought I was poor. I wanted to see if the fame would change him. Today, I got my answer. I stood up and brushed the mud off my pants. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt a cold, hard anger. It was the kind of anger that makes you want to fix a problem once and for all. I walked to the corner of the street where a big, black SUV was waiting in the shadows. As soon as I got close, the door opened. A man named Marcus, who handles all my secret business, stepped out with an umbrella. "Sir, are you okay?" Marcus asked, looking at my wet clothes and the mud on my face. "We saw what happened on the security cameras. Do you want me to call the police?" "No, Marcus," I said, my voice as steady as a rock. "The police can't fix this. I want you to call the bank. I want you to find the head of the hospital board. And I want a full list of every penny I've given to this hospital in the last 10 years. Every piece of equipment, every light bulb, and every brick in that new heart wing belongs to me." Marcus nodded. He knew that look in my eyes. It meant someone was about to lose everything. "What about the inauguration ceremony, sir? It's still going on inside." "Let them celebrate for a few more minutes," I said, stepping into the back of the warm SUV. "Elias wants to be a big shot chief. Let him enjoy the feeling. Because in 1 hour, he won't even be allowed to sweep the floors in that building. We are starting the Iron Anchor Protocol. I want this hospital to realize that without me, they're just an empty building with a lot of debt." As we drove away, I looked back at the hospital. It was a beautiful building, all glass and lights. I had named the new wing after Elias's mother, my sister. She was a good woman who taught me that family is the most important thing. Elias had forgotten that lesson. He thought he was better than the people who work with their hands. He thought his white coat made him a king. Inside the car, I changed out of my wet old suit. Marcus handed me a new one. It was black, perfectly fitted, and cost more than Elias made in a whole year. I put on a pair of clean shoes and straightened my tie. I looked in the mirror and didn't see Uncle Ben, the dock worker, anymore. I saw Benjamin Sterling, the man who owned the ships that moved the world. "Sir, the hospital board is gathered in the private lounge," Marcus said, looking at his tablet. "They are waiting for the mystery donor to arrive for the final signing. They have no idea it's you. They think the donor is a rich man from Europe." "Good," I said. "Let's give them a surprise they will never forget. I want the cameras ready. I want everyone to see the truth. Elias wants to show the world how great he is. Well, I'm going to show them exactly what he's made of." My heart was beating fast, but not because I was scared. I was ready. I had spent my life building things up, but tonight, I was going to enjoy tearing something down. Elias had pushed me into the dirt, but he forgot one very important rule of the shipyard. When you push someone into the mud, you better make sure they don't have the power to sink your ship. We pulled up to the front entrance of the hospital again. This time, I didn't walk. I sat in the back of the car and waited. The same security guards who had pushed me into the rain were standing there, looking bored. They saw the expensive SUV and immediately stood up straight. They straightened their hats and opened the doors, bowing their heads. They didn't recognize me with my clean hair and my expensive suit. To them, I was just another rich man they had to protect. "Welcome back, sir," one of them said, holding the door open. I didn't say a word. I just walked past them, the sound of my expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. Every step I took felt like a hammer hitting a nail. I was heading straight for the stage. I was heading straight for the man who called me garbage. The party was still going. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the sound of laughter. I stood at the back of the room, watching Elias. He was standing with a group of doctors, holding a glass of champagne and telling a story. He looked so proud. He looked like he had the world in his pocket. He didn't see me standing there in the shadows, watching him. He didn't know that his life was about to change forever. I reached into my pocket and felt the gold watch. It was time to give him his gift. But it wasn't going to be the gift he expected. It was going to be a lesson that he would remember for the rest of his life. "Stay close, Marcus," I whispered, "and tell the board I'm coming in." The lights in the room began to dim, and a spotlight hit the stage. The chairman of the hospital stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smiling at the crowd, "before we finish tonight's celebration for our new chief, Dr. Elias, we have a very special guest. For 10 years, an anonymous donor has given millions to save this hospital. Today, that man is here to sign the final papers to open our new heart wing. Please, join me in welcoming our hero." Elias stood there, clapping the loudest, looking around the room to see who the rich man was. He was smiling, hoping to shake the hand of someone famous and powerful. He had no idea that the hero was the same man he had kicked out into the rain just 20 minutes ago. I stepped out of the shadows and began to walk toward the stage. The room went quiet as people saw me. I didn't look like a dock worker anymore. I looked like the man who owned the world. And as I got closer to the stage, I saw the exact moment Elias realized who I was. His smile didn't just fade, it vanished. His face turned as white as his doctor's coat. His hand started to shake so hard that his champagne glass fell and shattered on the floor, just like his future was about to. The room was so quiet you could hear the water dripping off the coats of the people near the door. Elias stood on that stage like a statue. His eyes were wide, and his mouth was hanging open. He looked at my expensive suit, my polished shoes, and the way the hospital board members were bowing to me. He couldn't believe it. He kept shaking his head slightly, hoping I was just a ghost or a dream. But I was very real, and I was walking straight toward him. The chairman of the board, a tall man in a tuxedo named Mr. Henderson, ran over to me with a huge smile. "Mr. Sterling, we are so honored to finally meet you. We had no idea you were already in the building." He reached out to shake my hand, but I didn't take it. I kept my eyes locked on Elias. "Oh, "I've been here for a while, Henderson," I said, and my voice boomed through the speakers. "In fact, your new chief of surgery already gave me a very warm welcome. Didn't you, Elias?" Elias tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He made a small choking sound. The people in the crowd started whispering. They were looking back and forth between the hero donor and the star doctor. Elias finally found his voice, but it was weak and shaky. "Uncle Ben, what are you doing in those clothes? How is this possible?" The crowd gasped. The word uncle hit the room like a bomb. Mr. Henderson looked confused. "Uncle, Dr. Elias, you told us your family were diplomats in Europe. You said you grew up in a mansion in France." I laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Is that what he told you? Elias, tell them the truth. Tell them about the shipyard. Tell them about the one-bedroom shack where I stayed up all night, cleaning your clothes so you wouldn't look poor at school. Tell them about the garbage man you just kicked out into the rain." Elias took a step back, hitting the podium. He looked like he wanted to run away, but there was nowhere to go. His fiancée, a woman from a very rich family, walked up onto the stage. She looked at Elias with disgust. "Elias? Is this true? Is this man really your uncle? You told me you were a billionaire's son." I can explain." Elias stammered, his face turning a deep, shameful red. "I did it for us, Sarah. I couldn't let these people think I was just some kid from the docks. I had to protect my reputation." "Your reputation?" I asked, stepping closer to him. "You were so worried about your reputation that you threw away the only person who ever loved you. You were so ashamed of my dirty hands that you forgot those hands are the reason you know how to hold a scalpel." I turned to Mr. Henderson and the rest of the board members. 10 years ago, I started giving money to this hospital. I did it because I wanted my nephew to have the best tools to save lives. I built the Elias Heart Wing because I was proud of him. But today, I learned something very important. You can be the best doctor in the world, but if you are a hollow man with no heart, you shouldn't be leading a hospital. I pulled a thick folder out of my jacket. This is the contract for the $200 million endowment. It says that I have the right to pull the funding if the hospital's leadership doesn't meet my standards. And I've decided that having a liar and a coward as the chief of surgery is a very big problem. "Uncle, please," Elias cried out, moving toward me. "Don't do this. I worked so hard for this. If you take the money, the wing closes. My career is over." "Your career died the moment you whispered those words to me in the rain, Elias," I said. "You told me to go back to the dirt. Well, I'm still standing. But you're about to find out how hard the ground is when you fall from a lie that big." I looked at Mr. Henderson. "I am canceling the endowment. Every cent. And I am also calling in the loans on the medical equipment I purchased. By tomorrow morning, this hospital will be $100 million in debt. Unless..." Henderson looked like he was going to faint. "Unless what, Mr. Sterling?" "Anything. We will do anything." "Fire him," I said, pointing at Elias. "Fire him right now. Strip him of his title. Take back the keys to the hospital car and the penthouse you gave him. And tell him he is never allowed to practice medicine in this city again. If he stays, my money leaves. It's your choice." The room went completely silent. Everyone was looking at Henderson. He didn't even stop to think. He turned to Elias with a look of pure anger. "Dr. Elias, or whatever your name is, you lied to this board. You lied to your colleagues. And you insulted our greatest benefactor. You were stripped of your position. Security, please escort this man out of the building. And this time, use the back door." The same guards who had pushed me into the rain now moved toward Elias. They didn't care about his white coat anymore. They grabbed him by the arms. Elias started screaming, begging me to forgive him, but I just stood there. I watched as they dragged him off the stage, his shiny shoes scraping against the floor. The crowd didn't clap for him this time. They watched in silence as the great doctor was tossed out like trash. I stood on that stage, and for the first time in 20 years, the shipyard dust felt like it was finally gone. But I wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning of the lesson Elias needed to learn. After they dragged Elias out, the room felt different. People tried to come up to me with fake smiles and cold drinks, but I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. I left the hospital and got back into my car. I looked out the window and saw Elias sitting on the curb, right next to the trash cans where the guards had dumped him. His white coat was stained with mud, and he was holding his head in his hands. He looked exactly like he thought I was, a broken man with nothing. Drive, I told Marcus. We have more work to do. I didn't go home to my penthouse. Instead, I drove to the old shipyard district. Most of the buildings there were falling apart, but one stood tall and strong. It was my main office. I went inside and spent the whole night talking to my lawyers. Elias thought that losing his job was the worst thing that could happen, but he didn't realize how deep the hole he dug really was. You see, for years, Elias had been living a life he couldn't afford. He had a fancy apartment that cost $20,000 a month. He had a sports car that cost $300,000. He had credit card with no limits. He thought the hospital was paying for all of it. He didn't know that I was the one paying the bills through a secret company. Every time he swiped that card to buy an expensive watch or a bottle of wine to impress his friends, he was spending my money. Marcus, I said as the sun began to rise, cancel the lease on his apartment. Call the car company and tell them the car is being returned today. And those credit cards, shut them off. Every single one. What about his student loans, sir? Marcus asked. You were paying those off slowly every month. There is still about $400,000 left on the balance. I looked at the scars on my hands. Stop the payments. Let the bank send him the bill. He wanted to be a self-made man. It's time he sees what that actually costs. By noon the next day, the news was everywhere. The story of the fake doctor and the secret billionaire was on every TV screen in the city. Elias was a laughingstock. I was sitting in a quiet cafe when I saw him walk past the window. He looked terrible. He was wearing a cheap tracksuit, and he was carrying 2 big trash bags. Those bags held everything he owned. He saw my car parked outside and realized I was inside the cafe. He came running to the door, but my bodyguard stopped him. He started crying, loud enough for everyone to hear. Uncle Ben, please, talk to me, he begged. The landlord locked me out. They took my car. I have nowhere to go. My friends won't answer my calls. Sarah canceled the wedding. I walked to the door and told the guards to let him in. He fell on my feet, right there on the floor of the cafe. He tried to grab my hand, but I pulled it away. You said you didn't have an uncle who smelled like a garage, Elias, I said quietly. So why are you here talking to me? I was stupid. I was arrogant, he sobbed. I thought I was better than everyone. I forgot everything you did for me. Please, I'll do anything. I'll work in a shipyard. I'll sweep the floors. Just don't let me lose everything. I looked at him for a long time. Part of me wanted to forgive him. He was the boy I had raised, after all. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he told the guards to throw me out. I remembered how he whispered that I was dirt. If I had really been a poor man that night, he would have let me sleep in the rain without a second thought. He was only sorry now because the money was gone. The shipyard is full, Elias, I told him. And you don't have the hands for that kind of work. Your hands are too soft. You spent too much time hiding from the truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I dropped it on the floor next to him. There's $500 in there. It's exactly what I had in my pocket 20 years ago when I took you in after your parents died. It was enough to get us a room and some food back then. Elias looked at the envelope like it was a snake. $500? Uncle, that won't even pay for one night in a hotel. Then you better find a cheaper hotel, I said, because that is the last thing you will ever get from me. You want to be a chief? Well, now you're the chief of those 2 trash bags. Good luck, Elias. I hope the dirt is as comfortable as you thought it would be. I walked out of the cafe and didn't look back. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could finally move on. But Elias was more desperate than I realized. He didn't go find a job. He didn't try to fix his life. He decided that if he couldn't have my money, he would make sure no one could. That night, my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was the security team at the shipyard. Mr. Sterling, you need to get down here. There's a fire at the main dock, and the cameras caught someone familiar near the fuel tanks. My heart sank. I knew exactly who it was. Elias wasn't just ungrateful. He was dangerous. I rushed to the shipyard as fast as I could. The night sky was glowing a scary orange color. Thick, Black smoke was rising from the docks where my biggest ships were parked. These weren't just ships to me. They were the result of 20 years of hard work. Thousands of people worked here to feed their families. If the shipyard burned down, all of them would lose everything. When I got there, fire trucks were everywhere. Their sirens were loud, and the water from their hoses was splashing against the hot metal. I saw Marcus standing near the police cars. He looked very worried. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Marcus pointed toward the old warehouse at the end of the pier. "He's trapped himself inside, sir. He started the fire near the fuel lines, but the wind changed. The fire moved faster than he expected. The building is surrounded by flames, and he can't get out." I looked at the warehouse. It was an old wooden building that we used for storage. It was burning like a giant candle. Through the dusty windows, I could see a shadow moving. It was Elias. He was coughing and hitting the glass, trying to break it. He was terrified. He had tried to burn down my dream, but he had ended up catching himself in his own trap. The fire chief ran over to me. "Sir, we can't go in there. The roof is about to fall, and the heat is too high. It's too dangerous." I looked at the flames, and then at the shadow in the window. Even after everything Elias did, even after he called me trash, kicked me out in the rain, and tried to ruin my business, I couldn't just stand there and watch him die. He was still the little boy I had carried on my shoulders. I grabbed a heavy fire blanket from the back of an emergency truck and soaked it in water. "Mr. Sterling, no. You'll never make it," Marcus shouted, grabbing my arm. "He's family." "Marcus," I said, pulling away. Even if he forgot that, I didn't. I wrapped the wet blanket over my head and ran toward the burning building. The heat felt like a wall hitting me in the face. My lungs burned with every breath. I kicked the side door open, and a wave of hot air nearly knocked me down. Inside, the smoke was so thick I couldn't see my own feet. "Elias," I screamed. "Elias, where are you?" I heard a weak cough from behind a pile of burning crates. I crawled across the floor, the wood hot beneath me. I found him huddled in a corner, his expensive tracksuit melted and his face covered in soot. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the scared little boy I used to know. "Uncle Ben," he whispered, his voice almost gone. "You came for me?" "Don't talk," I said. I threw half of the wet blanket over him and pulled him to his feet. He was weak, and I had to carry most of his weight. We stumbled through the falling wood and the sparks. Every second felt like an hour. Just as we reached the door, a giant beam from the ceiling crashed down right behind us. We fell out onto the cold, wet ground just as the entire warehouse collapsed into a mountain of fire. The doctors and firemen rushed to us, putting oxygen masks on our faces. We lay there on the pavement, side by side, breathing in the cold night air. Elias turned his head toward me. He was crying, and the tears made clean streaks through the black soot on his face. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Uncle Ben. I destroyed everything. I'm a monster." I didn't say anything. I just looked at the stars. I had saved his life, but the shipyard was badly damaged. Millions of dollars were gone. But more importantly, the trust one had for him was gone forever. As the sun began to rise over the smoking ruins of the dock, the police moved in. They waited for the doctors to finish checking Elias. Then, a tall officer walked up and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Elias Sterling," the officer said, "you are under arrest for arson and attempted destruction of property." Elias looked at me, his eyes begging for help. "Uncle, please tell them it was an accident. Don't let them take me." I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I looked at my nephew one last time. I thought about the shipyard, the fire, and the look on his face at the party when he told the guards to throw me out. "I saved your life because you are my sister's son," I said quietly. "But I cannot save you from yourself. You made your choice, Elias. Now you have to live with it." The handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists. The great Dr. Elias was gone. Now, he was just a prisoner. As they led him away to the police car, I turned to Marcus. "Is the damage bad?" I asked. "It's bad, sir," Marcus sighed. "But we can rebuild. It will take time and a lot of work." "Good," I said, looking at my scarred, dirty hands. "I've never been afraid of a little hard work. But first, there's one more thing I need to do." I knew there was someone else involved in this. Elias wasn't smart enough to plan a fire like this on his own. Someone had been whispering in his ear, pushing him to hate me. And I was going to find out who it was. Ready for the final part. I spent the next few days cleaning up the mess Elias had made. But while the workers were fixing the docks, I was doing some digging. I knew Elias was arrogant, but he wasn't brave enough to start a fire by himself. I looked through his phone records and found dozens of calls to one person, Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the hospital board. I invited Henderson to my office. He walked in with a big smile, acting like he was my best friend. "Mr. Sterling, I heard about the fire. Such a tragedy. I hope you're going to build an even bigger shipyard now." I sat behind my desk and didn't smile back. I turned the computer screen around so he could see it. It showed a video of him and Elias meeting in a dark parking lot the night before the fire. Henderson was handing Elias a map of the shipyard's fuel lines. "You wanted the shipyard to burn, so I would be forced to sell the land to you, didn't you?" I asked. "You told Elias that if he destroyed my business, I would have to give him his job back to keep him quiet." Henderson's face turned gray. He tried to laugh it off. "That's just a misunderstanding, Ben. I was just helping the boy." "No," I said. "You were using a broken young man to do your dirty work. But you forgot one thing. I don't just own ships. I own the bank that holds the mortgage on your hospital." I picked up a pen and signed a single piece of paper. "I just bought your debt, Henderson. You're fired from the board, and I'm taking the hospital back. You and Elias can share a lawyer, because you're both going to jail." Security walked Henderson out of the room. He was screaming and begging, just like Elias had. Finally, the room was quiet. I was alone with my thoughts. A week later, I went to the prison to see Elias. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit. He looked small and tired. He didn't look like a doctor or a big shot anymore. He just looked like a man who had lost his way. "I'm sorry, Uncle Ben," he whispered through the glass. "I lost everything because I was ashamed of the man who loved me most. I see that now." "I hope you do, Elias," I said. "I've set up a small fund for you. It's not millions. It's just enough for you to get an education and something honest when you get out. No more lies. No more fancy titles. Just hard work." I stood up to leave. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had spent 20 years trying to give Elias a life he didn't have to work for. And that was my mistake. True character isn't built in a penthouse. It's built in the dirt, in the shipyard, and in the truth. I walked out into the sunlight. My hands were still scarred, and I still smelled a little bit like the shipyard, but I walked with my head held high. I was Benjamin Sterling, and I finally had the only thing money can't buy: peace of mind. Thank you so much for watching this journey with me. If you believe that honesty and hard work are more important than fancy titles, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. Don't forget to tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Elias? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? See you in the next story.